More Russian missile strikes on Ukraine's crucial port city of Odessa on the Black Sea. The Ukrainians say 21 people there have been killed over the past 5 days. Reuters quotes the region's governor as saying the Russians are hitting grain terminals. The United Nations today warned that the attacks on Ukraine's ability to export grain will impact global food security, which of course will especially hurt developing countries. The Russians canceled the previous deal to allow the export of Ukrainian grain earlier this week. They said they did so in retaliation for what they claim was a Ukrainian strike that damaged a key bridge to Crimea, a part of Ukraine that the Russians illegally seized in 2014. In Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin is seething about the continuing flow of weapons Ukraine is getting from its allies, especially from the United States. But, as CNN's Fred Pleitgen reports for us now, Putin's isolation and alleged paranoia appear to be growing worse, according to experts, and officials at the CIA, among others, are noticing.
With Ukraine now using U.S.-supplied cluster munitions to try and penetrate the Russian army's entrenched positions on the southern front, Russian leader Vladimir Putin ripping into the U.S. and its allies for aiding Kyiv.
The whole world can see that the supposedly invulnerable equipment that the West boasted about is on fire, and technically, it is often even inferior to some Soviet-made weapons. Yes, of course, additional Western armaments can be supplied and thrown into battle. This, of course, causes us certain damage and prolongs the conflict.
But while Putin tries to project superiority on the battlefield, at home, the Kremlin continues to silence critical voices, even some of those supporting their war. Prominent military blogger Igor Girkin, who also goes by Igor Strelkov, arrested today, his wife said, after remarks blasting the lack of progress of Russia's military campaign in Ukraine. The situation with the special military operation and in the country in general is deplorable, to put it mildly, he said. This is a result of actions of the incumbent power. Girkin is a former colonel in Russia's security service, FSB, and was the defense minister of the so-called Donetsk People's Republic in eastern Ukraine when the Malaysian jetliner MH17 was shot down there in 2014. Girkin was found guilty of mass murder in absentia by a Dutch court for involvement in the incident, which he has never acknowledged. While Girkin is considered a war criminal in Ukraine, he deems himself a Russian ultra-nationalist who feels the war should be prosecuted even more brutally. Putin's grip on power was only recently challenged by the uprising of the Wagner private military company and its boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Now, the Russian leader wants to calm things down, CIA Director William Burns believes.
Putin is trying to buy time as he considers what to do with Wagner and what to do with Prigozhin himself. You know, Putin hates, in my experience anyway, the image that he's overreacting to things.
But that doesn't mean Prigozhin is forgiven, Burns says.
If I were Prigozhin, I wouldn't fire my food taster.
At that same event, Jake, the CIA director also calling Vladimir Putin the ultimate apostle of payback, which obviously could spell trouble for Yevgeny Prigozhin down the line. And if you look at Igor Girkin, for instance, I mean, we have to keep in mind this was one of Putin's most important figures back in 2014. Now he's in jail. He's been ordered to remain there at least until at least September 18th and could face up to 5 years in prison for alleged extremism.
More, I'm joined by CNN senior national security correspondent Alex Marquardt, who is in Kyiv for us. Alex, as Ukraine braces for more Russian strikes, President Zelensky says there will be a response to these attacks in Odessa. Give us the latest.
Yeah, Jim, President Zelensky not offering any details, but vowing that there will be a response for these 4 days in a row, at least. We're still waiting to see what happens tonight, but for now, 4 days in a row of ferocious attacks. President Zelensky did meet with his top commanders earlier. He said following that meeting that only absolute evil can inflict such attacks. Jim, we were right in the middle of these attacks. We watched them unfold, this unbelievable combination of drones and cruise missiles in the middle of the night. Today, the fourth day, was a little bit different. It happened in the early daylight hours in the morning. 7 cruise missiles hitting a region just outside of Odessa City, still within the Odessa region. hitting what the Ukrainians called an infrastructure facility and destroying equipment, that facility, as well as around 120 tons of food. Now, Ukraine is accusing Russia of racketeering because they pulled out of this grain deal, saying that they're trying to drive food prices up so that they can make a profit off of hunger. The global community has accused Russia of weaponizing hunger. Russia, meanwhile, is saying that this is in response, these attacks on Odessa and elsewhere are in response to the Ukrainian attack on that Kerch Bridge, which connects Russia with Russian illegally annexed Crimea. Interestingly, Jim, President Zelensky saying that after that brazen attack by Ukraine on Monday, Ukraine is going to keep attacking that bridge because it is so vital to Russia. Zelensky calling it an enemy facility that must be neutralized. Jim?
And Alex, we're also hearing interesting comments from the CIA director, Bill Burns, on how Putin will eventually respond to that attempted rebellion last month. What can you tell us about that?
And how he will respond specifically to the leader of that rebellion, Evgeny Prigozhin. These really are fascinating comments by Bill Burns, the CIA director. Clearly, he does not believe that this saga between Putin and Prigozhin is over. There were immediate questions about what Prigozhin's fate would be. Burns is saying that Putin will not act immediately. He doesn't want to appear uncertain. He doesn't want to be seen overreacting. He doesn't want to be seen as doing anything rash. But that revenge, Burns says, Putin believes is a dish best served cold. Here's a little bit more of what he had to say.
Putin is someone who generally thinks that revenge is a dish best served cold. So he's going to try to settle the situation to the extent he can. But again, in my experience, Putin is the ultimate apostle of payback. So I would be surprised if Prigozhin escapes further retribution for this. If I were Prigozhin, I wouldn't fire my food taster.
So Burns saying there that Putin is waiting for things to settle down, but clearly, in the Biden administration's opinion, this was the most direct assault, Burns said, to Putin's rule in the 23 years he has been in power. Jim? Yeah,
revenge may certainly be on the menu. All right, Alex Marquardt, thanks very much. Stand by for more on this. We're joined by CNN contributor on Russian affairs, Jill Doherty. Jill, great to see you. What do you make of this analysis from the CIA director, Bill Burns? Why might Putin be biding his time to retaliate against Prigozhin? We kind of saw this coming.
Yeah, well, right now, that rebellion has really unleashed a lot of groups. And a lot of the groups are on the right. These are extremists, they are ultra-nationalists, and they're really kind of dangerous guys. So I think what Putin is trying to do, number one, he is to figure out what do you do with Prigozhin. And as we all know, Prigozhin, who led that rebellion, was really valuable because he had men, armed men, and he also had this enormous series of companies that helped out the Russian government on various levels. But then you have to figure out, what do you do with these guys who are saying the conventional military in Russia is not cruel enough, is not harsh enough, and that we really have to take it to Ukraine and do even more. And these are the people that are really, really dangerous, and they could be dangerous to Putin as well. So I think that's what's going on, and that's what the director is referring to.